Yes. Do I care? No. Hey guys, it's Zuri and I'm back with another video. So, it is July 2nd. 2 days ago, I finished my very first webcomic. Yay! Woo! And this is a pretty big deal for me, even though like in the grand scheme of things, it might not be the biggest deal in the world, but for me, this is something that I've wanted to do for a while. And just finishing a story by itself has always been a really hard thing for me. So the fact that I was able to complete a story, complete a webcomic, I feel proud of myself, okay? I feel really proud of myself. So today I'm going to be talking about all the things that I learned while making a webcomic for the very first time. And hopefully these things will help you if you are looking to make a webcomic or if you have always wanted to make a webcomic. The first thing that I learned is that planning is everything. Before you even start to draw, you have to plan basically everything in your comic in terms of story. Who are your characters? What is your setting? What's gonna happen? Like, what's the plot? What's the beginning, middle, and ending? I did my webcomic for a short story contest, so having a beginning, a middle, and an ending was basically one of the core requirements of the contest, because in a short story you have to pack a lot in a very short amount of time. Even if it's like an ongoing story, you should still have like an end goal in mind, and sometimes you will have to plan as you go along. I definitely had to plan as I went along. There's nothing wrong with planning as you go along. Even if in your head you know where your story is going, that's fine. And for something like this where there was a time limit, I had to plan as I went along, but I knew in my head what I wanted my story to be. I knew how it was going to end. If you have an ending in sight, then that's great. So if I didn't have to be focused so much on the time factor for this, I would definitely sit down and plan out everything before I even drew. But because I didn't have a lot of time to get this done, I had to plan as I went along. And I know everyone works differently. Some people would rather draw as they go along. Other people would rather sit down and plan out everything first. And I feel like as long as you have a plan, as long as you know where you're going, that's the main goal. Because I feel like a lot of times I have not completed stories because I have a really good premise, but I don't know where I'm going with it. So if you have a really good premise, but you don't know where you're going with it, I suggest really planning out every little detail first. But if you have a story, you know where you're going with it, and you just need to start, then start. I mean, I think it's really up to you, but I feel like planning everything, story, characters, is really important, because if you don't know where you're going, it's easy to hit a wall and be like, I don't know what to do anymore, and then maybe you won't finish your story, and then it'll just be, you know, disappointing. The second thing that I learned is that scheduling is extremely helpful to you. I struggled with scheduling a lot. Like, I know that when it comes to holding myself to a specific schedule, I struggle. If it's school or something where, you know, you have class at 9 and then you have like another class at 10, like, I'm good with that. But when it comes to holding myself to a schedule, something I need to work on. So for this Webtoon competition, you had to have at least 30 panels or 30 images per episode. You could do more than 30, but the least amount of images you have to do is 30. So at first, I was just gonna try and do as many as I could, as many as would get the story across, as in like, okay, in episode 1, this, and this need to happen. I'll just draw as many images as is necessary to get those plot points down. But the more I went along, the more I realized that if I did that, I wouldn't have enough time to get everything done, because as I said, I'm a bit long-winded. So I realized that like episode 2 would have like 50 panels, and I only had like a month left, and I basically calculated how much time I would have and decide that, okay, if I do 5 panels a day, I will get 30 panels and I'll get one episode. So I tried to limit myself to 30 panels per episode just for time efficiency, and it worked. It was hard, and up until the very last week, I didn't stick to the whole 5 panels a day thing. I actually had to push it to 6 panels a day in order to get it done in the last week before the contest was over. So basically what I'm trying to say is that figuring out how many panels you're going to draw is important. Even if you don't have a specific time limit, if you're just doing a webcomic yourself, no one's holding you to it, it's still important so you can get it done. Say, okay, the first episode is going to be 50 panels, therefore I'm gonna have to draw 5 panels a day for the next 5 panels a day for the next 10 days. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 45, 10 days, and then I'll have the first episode done. So this is just how I do it. I don't know if anyone else who has done webcomics before, if this is how they plan it out. I mean, it also depends on how many panels you can do a day. For me, it takes me like 2 to 3 hours to finish one panel. So, I mean, technically speaking, 5 panels a day is a bit of a stretch for me, and so is 6. But I could do it, and I had to do it. So it really depends on how much panels you can spit out a day. If it's just 1 panel a day, great. You just do 1 panel a day for however long it takes you to get that first episode done. It really just depends on you. And I guess that's the main point I want to come across. Like, these things I figure out for myself, but you can just tailor it to suit your working style.
I would also like to point out that a lot of webcomics are actually made by more than one person. Like, one person will work on the story, a different person will do the actual art, another person is doing the coloring. Like, it's a team effort a lot of the time. Not to say that you can't do webcomic by yourself, but if it's really difficult, just remember that a lot of times it's a team job. So, maybe find someone that can help you out in some sort of way. So this advice is really if you're doing a comic by yourself, but even if you're doing it with other people, these things can also be taken into account too. It just depends on what kind of work you're doing and who you're doing it with, or if you're doing it by yourself. So yeah, continuing with the video now.
So the third thing that I learned is that it's kind of easy when it comes to a webcomic to kind of, at least for me, I found that my story wasn't as character driven as I wanted it to be. Like, I really love characters. I feel like everyone has their kind of preference, whether they like when a story is really detailed in terms of characters, or really detailed in terms of plot, or really detailed in terms of like world building, like the lore of like the world that they're in. I really love characters. Like, I want to fall in love with characters. I want to feel like I know them. I want to feel like they're my best friend. You know what I mean? So I feel like for my story, because it was like a short story and because I had a time limit and everything, I had to kind of push away developing my characters on a deeper level in order to just focus on the plot, like what happens. I feel like you can kind of get a sense of my characters a bit, but it's not as much as I would like. So I guess it just depends on what you favor. I mean, some people might like plot versus characters, but I really enjoy characters over plot. So that's just something that I had to think about. And for my next webcomic, which I do plan on doing another one at some point, not now, but at some point, for my next one, how can I bring forth the characters a bit more? What can I do to balance out character and plot? And maybe you'll read my comic and you'll feel like it is very character driven. I don't know. Again, everyone has their own opinions on this. I feel like some webcomics that I've read for this competition have a very even, I feel like that's a good balance to strike. I feel like a lot of comics I've read, you get a good sense of the characters, but because it's a short story, it really has to be like, fast-paced in a way. So the fourth and final thing that I'm going to be talking about that I learned is kind of an obvious one, but it's that visuals is everything. And I say this because, a webcomic is a very visual thing, and it's a very unique form of storytelling. I was thinking about this because when you watch a movie, it's also very visual. but you aren't really in control of the pacing of the story as much as if you're reading a webcomic. Because yes, the story's already planned out for you, but you can choose how fast to scroll, how slow to scroll, how much to absorb and really take in things. And sure, you can slow down a movie or speed it up, but most of the time you're just going to watch at normal speed unless you have to slow it down for some reason. But anyhow, I just find it a very interesting form of storytelling. And if you ever get stuck on something, you really have to think about how are you going to portray this visually. Yes, words are used in webcomics to, convey dialogue or narration, but I'm sure you could do an entire webcomic with just pictures, kind of like a picture book. I feel like something like that exists out there, and I find that very, very interesting, and that's something that I had to think about. It's really all about the visuals and what you're seeing and how the images that you have conveys a message. Like, something in storytelling that you hear a lot about is show, don't tell. In writing, you show by instead of saying she was sad, that's telling you she was sad. But showing is she walked into her house with a heavy sigh, sat on the couch and stared off into the distance, something like that. And with comics, instead of saying, just writing she was sad, you show like a mournful look into the distance or tears running down a character's face. It's a very visual form of storytelling that's very powerful and very engaging, and something that I really like about webcomics. I never realized how much I would really enjoy making webcomic until I made one. If you ever get stuck on what's happening next in your comic, maybe think about, okay, how are the characters feeling? Where are they? How can I convey, what's going on, the emotions in this scene? Just keep in mind that it's a very visual thing. So yeah, those are all of the things that I learned while making a webcomic. Again, all of these things are very relative to me. These are things that I took away from the experience. You might have other things you took away or other things that you gathered, and everyone works differently, so it's going to be different for everyone. But yeah, if you subscribed to my channel for Webtoon content, thank you. But for now, I'm not really sure what kind of videos I want to make. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comment section down below. I'll take a look. I appreciate all of the support and all the kind words that I've gotten for these Webtoon videos, and I do plan on making more Webtoon videos. I'm not sure exactly when, and I don't know what I'll be making until then, but hopefully stick around and enjoy the other things that I make, because my content just fluctuates depending on what I'm doing. If I decide to do another weird artistic type of contest, that will be the kind of videos I'll be making. I don't know. But yeah, thank you for all the support this far. I really appreciate it. If you haven't read my webcomic, Whatever Happened, I will leave it in the description down below. You can go check it out. And yeah, I thank you again, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.